Good morning, and thank you for staying with us. You're listening to Smooth 98.1. This is Smooth Breakfast with me, Valentine.
And Fola, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us, Lagos. And special thanks to our analysts for stepping in this morning. We're welcoming Deveo Okorie into the studio. Good morning, Deveo.
Good morning, Lagos. A cool next level in 5 days.
Wonderful. And we have, for first time in many weeks, Rotus is joining us.
What's going on? How did I end up here? What's happening? What's the problem?
A cool kind of thing.
It's a feel good Friday. That's why. All right. Join the conversation by sending messages to WhatsApp. That number.
The number is 0809 444 0981, and you can tweet at smooth981fm.
All right, use the hashtag freshlypressed981. We're streaming live on YouTube. You can also leave a message with the live chat button there. And you can send messages, right? You can send messages through WhatsApp. I said that earlier. But that, a reminder of the number again, 0809 444 0981. The Reuters is at Rotan Quotes on Twitter.
Yes.
Yes.
Are we spelling it?
No.
No spell. We'll spell it too.
Rotan Quotes with a K. And then Deveo is at Deveo Okorie. Our first story is from the Guardian newspaper, and I'll come to you, Reuters, for this one. Minister of Transportation Chibike Rotimi Amechi yesterday said that the federal government had requested a fresh $1.8 billion from the China Exim Bank for the construction of the railway line. A few things spark concern here. How the plan to use that loan, the application of it is in question, and also some part of the story reveals in the detail how Amechi seems to be displeased with how the money or the funds that have been generated or revenue generated from the railway corporation operations are handled. Please take us through this story and answer.
Yes. So the federal government, as we know, has funding issues as far as the amount of revenue that we're supposed to be bringing in from oil, which is supposed to be able to take care of capital expenditure projects across the nation, one of which, of course, is infrastructure, which now translates into the rail line. This money that they're requesting from the Chinese is the main concern here for me is that it is going to increase our debt service, what it is that we're paying in debt. Yeah, yes. Which right now, if you look at what it costs us for every 100 naira Nigeria makes, about 60 naira of that goes towards our debt. Rotimi Amechi is, well, his issues with this, as far as the fund is concerned, this is what his beef is with the managing director, Fidel Okira. Yes. As far as how much revenue the Nigerian Railway Corporation has been bringing in and its overhead costs. Its costs are exceeding its revenue. I think they're putting in here that Mr. Okira revealed that they earned about 16 million naira monthly, and they've now increased that to 80 million. But then he now turned around and also said that their monthly overheads were initially 56 million, but then that's also ballooned up to 100 million. Whenever these different agencies are talking about how much revenue they bring in, I really do stress that folks should also listen to how much their overheads cost as well, because it's one thing to claim that, oh, we brought in how many million this month. That's revenue. When
that's not profit.
It's not profit. So there's your cost of doing business has to come in. So the Nigerian Railway Corporation is at this point struggling to bring in enough funds to cover what its costs. Yeah, we need the money from the Chinese. I won't even beat around the bushes, but as far as that is concerned. But the issue though is as to whether or not we can continue to maintain the cost of these debts, because as it is right now, this is now going to add another layer to it. Do we need it? Yes. Do we need improved coastal lines? Yes.
But we really need to be proactive in paying back these debts, and which really will come from how accountable we are to making sure that we examine the overhead costs.
Right.
Make sure that we incur profits enough to pay back the debts.
And then I don't know if you touched on this on First to Press a while back. There was a time when there was a video of Amechi when he went to one of the stations, one of the railway stations there. I believe it's the Kaduna Abuja line. They were talking about the ticket scalping that was going on there. How they were, money that was supposed to be going to the corporation was being put in pockets of people who were taking tickets and selling them on the side. went there and warned all of them and said, if I hear about this again, I'll come back and take the big man out, and then the little people under him will also go away. People at that time said, look, if you want to solve the ticketing issue, which also translates into revenue for the Nigerian Railway Corporation, make it an e-ticket thing. Make it, set up machines, automate it, like ATMs and so on.
Eliminate the human factor.
Eliminate the human factor. But then folks now came back and said, well, what about jobs and so on? Look, you have to pick your poison here. If you want, right? If you want to be if you want to be efficient and you want to be able to ensure that the money that is supposed to be coming from ticket sales and so on are going to the government, you have to set up these machines to increase efficiency and so on. But we are where we are. So again, the main takeaway from this is that yes, we need the money, we need the coastal lines. Look at fuel tankers, but the issues with railway lines should be carrying fuel from around the country. But the main concern here is, can Nigeria afford to be taking these loans? It is costing us more and more money to pay these back.
Thank you very much, Robertus. Let's move on to you, Deveo, for the next story from Premium Times. Core members call for a review of NYSC skills acquisition program. I was talking about the National Youth Service Corps. They've called for a review of the skills acquisition and entrepreneurship development, that's SAED program of the scheme. We know it was established in 2012. So far, do you think, how far have they gone in achieving this objective? And what is the aim of the program? How do you perceive the government's, how do you perceive the plan to address the concern?
I actually was afraid reading it initially because I thought they were pushing for the scrapping of NYSC, but it was actually the scheme among it. For those who have passed through the National Youth Service Scheme, usually it's 4 graduates once you've graduated from a tertiary institution. Now, as part of the course, because many of them, as usual, hope to get a white-collar job, of which there's a limit to, the federal government introduced this scheme to, in a way, augment the competence that was required for vocational activity, so that if you don't get a white-collar job, you can as well have the competence and the skills to be able to carry out some level of entrepreneurship or even work in a firm that requires cosmetology, construction, agro-allied, ICT, film, photography, power and energy, automobile, education, culture, and tourism, among others. And it has been successful because in different states, different core members have been able to produce very noble items and artifacts that come from these skill sets. However, as with everything in this country, implementation has been the issue. Now, the core members are complaining that 2 major issues. That one, it's wrongly timed. Most time the facilitators ask them to come for these courses right after they finish the march. They're tired. It lasts for over like 2 to 3 hours. So at the end of the day, they're not really getting anything out of it. Secondly, I think this is the core of the complaint. It's become an exploitative feature of their service year, whereby the facilitators in various states are asking them to pay different amounts, especially knowing that the corporate, that's his first time on federal government allowance, of which is capped. So some of them are saying that they were disappointed that they couldn't afford the 1,000 naira that the facilitators were asking them to pay up. So they've asked the federal government either to look for some way of rightly timing it in terms of setting aside 1 week, or at the same time paying for whatever they need to do, since they're federal government babies for that year, that they can't be exploited simply because they've been asked to do it. So I'm hoping that this little cookie does not spoil the whole meal for corporates, because the real intent is for them to get that vocational training. Yesterday, was it yesterday? No, a day before, we were discussing about HNDs becoming universities.
Oh, yes.
You see, here we come again.
Yes.
If everybody becomes a graduate, who's going to do that work?
The practical
work, the technical work. And this 1 year that they do every CD when they go to the local government is actually not enough. But the truth is, it's because this area is required within our economy. Some people are trained to do these things. It doesn't require much skills. It actually brings out the talent in most people. And they shouldn't use it as an opportunity to exploit them. I mean, paying for, what do you call it again? Those handouts in university are enough not to come as a corporate, but still paying for handouts.
Can I please, just really quick, add something to this? The federal government, again, and this seems to be a theme of our stories, the costs of skills acquisition programs are high. And the government keeps thinking that they're the only ones that are going to be able to handle this. There's also Empower. There's the whole Empower program
Right.
where they're planning on training, I don't know if it was 3 million graduates or so, and then posting them to schools and hospitals and so on. Yeah, you can cover that for a year, but then after the program is over, where do they go? Where is the guarantee of them getting employment?
What's the long-term plan for that?
What was the long-term plan exactly? And you have to get qualified people who can teach these skills. And as Deveo has already mentioned, where are they going to be deployed? So
think that the idea or the aim behind the skills acquisition program, because most of these skills acquisition programs train them in a particular skill that enables them to be self-employed,
Right.
not to go back into the labor market
Okay.
to look for employment.
yeah, but okay, think of all the artisans that are around. Think of all the skill. Each of us knows about 5-6 skilled people who are particularly adept at doing something, but are they employed? The
Most of them
issue,
are creating their own jobs.
right? They're creating their own jobs,
If
but
they're
then
creating their own jobs, then they are employed.
okay. So but that's the thing, though. As
I
far
think
as
self-employment is a thing, right?
yeah, if self-employment was a thing and it was actually working in Nigeria, then we'd all be self-employed. Yeah, but there's the issue though is that folks,
the
it-
story
it's
doesn't
just
really
not-
bring it out
Yeah.
as to the success of this program. So
they
I
never
think-
do.
Yeah, so no. So that's what they need to look at
Yeah.
because the Empower project, it's not for the federal government to line up places for them. That's the whole idea. Hey, you can start this skill. You can create a mechanic workshop. You can create a beauty parlor. You can actually become
Yes.
use this vocational course because in terms of manpower, the country does need these things. We discussed about house helps the other day.
Right.
There's a huge demand for it. That space hasn't been filled in.
Mm.
Electricians, I'm sure everybody needs an electrician. I'm sure everybody needs a plumber down the road.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
But I guess Fola's concern was coming from the fact that you just learn a skill is one step. Another step is to provide capacity.
Monetize that.
Right.
turn it into a
Provide
business.
capacity to
Yeah,
turn
to
into
do it,
business
and
and
that's
to,
that's
express your skill. And it's interesting that Reuters and Deveo touched on the areas of technology and proficiency or practicality
right.
in terms of education and how it is learned. In one of the stories that we'll touch on much later, we'll see some of the bills passed by the Senate, and one of them really touches on Yabatech, the turning
Yeah,
into
yeah.
a city
Upgrading.
university.
Yeah, upgrading it.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
All right, so WhatsApp messages here. Emeka in Ejigo says, "Good morning, guys. Reuters did a good job. My question is, what government is why finance rail operations while you're not in charge of tickets? It's just like government spending money on power stations without being in charge of the revenue generated.
Good
Please
point.
break everything up, as government is not meant to be in business."
All right,
Good
and
point,
Francis
good
from
point.
Surrey sent this one. It says, beyond comprehension that in 2019, Nigeria, with a population of over 200 million people, does not have a functional and efficient railway service. That's an absolute disgrace. Well, it's not true. We actually have a functional railway service. It's just not in every part of the country.
Which means it's not functional.
It says, the message is not
Mike says, "Oh, I thought you were done with the messages." Alright.
But anyway, let's get to the next stories. Punch newspaper has this one. Stakeholders in the telecommunications industry are calling on the federal government to give an executive order that will stop state and local governments from imposing multiple and punitive levies on infrastructure. We'll come back to multiplicity of taxes again. This is a concern. But then again, how do you see this being addressed? Because it's a prolonged issue, and they're crying that it's affecting the overhead cost.
Look, Valentine, this former Minister of Communication and Technology, Dr. Omobola Johnson, there's the quote. "I'm so disappointed that I left the government in 2015. And in May 2019, we are still talking about multiple taxes.
Thank you.
We on Smooth. I'm sorry, I have to plug one of my shows. Business Hub on Tuesdays at 5 o'clock or 5:15. You guys can tune into Business Hub every Tuesday. We talk to SMEs, right, and we talk to entrepreneurs, different sectors, like entertainment, manufacturing, healthcare, technology. To a woman, to a man, every single one of them, when we ask them about the challenges that they face during their business here, they talk about multiple taxation. It just never ends,
So
you know.
when I spoke with Dr. Babatunde Fola,
Yeah.
the executive chairman of the FIRS,
Yeah.
Federal Inland Revenue Service, he mentioned that these problems will be addressed because it seems to be the most troubling issue by most multinationals and even telecoms.
Right.
They've been complaining about this. And he said, oh, that's the responsibility of the Joint Task Board. What did they do? The Joint Task Board pretty much articulate all these taxes and put it in one, because you even find people having this complaints of paying a tax in Lagos, and then because your business has to take you to other states, you
Right.
go to Delta State, for instance, you have to pay tax on the Delta State.
Right.
So it seems to be a conflict of,
With left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing, and so on and so forth. And then it's state level, local government level. But say, you know what? With the let me take this to the Apapa gridlock thing. Buhari just issued an executive order and said, hey,
72 hours.
you have 72 hours to clear out, just like that. I didn't know that Nigeria's problems could just be solved at the snap of a finger. So I guess if they can apply that, he should just issue an executive order and just stop all taxes. But this is the one area where our central system of governance, which I've criticized in the past, I think all the states should be allowed to independently set their own taxes and so on and so forth. In removing this, because it's centralized, the federal government should be able to issue an executive order. But look, for businesses, our big yellow company that just listed on the stock exchange now, their capital expenditure every year is 200 billion naira, I believe. Every single as far as how much they have to, or is that 200 million? I have to be sure about that. But essentially, that's what they need in capital expenditure. They're looking to expand to 5G, yeah. And of course, many people can complain and say some of us are still using 3G,
Yes,
some without 4G, right?
Okay.
So you've got that's an expensive venture that they're going on. And it's not just them that has to do this. All the other telecoms companies want to offer faster service, but you've got that headache. You've got maintenance of the base stations. You've got the diesel requirements when power goes out. They have so many expenses that their cost of doing business is so high that when you now put taxes on top of that and from multiple areas, it just makes things harder. And some of them have to now pass this cost on to the final consumer.
But who checks all these people who go down and from the local governments? I don't want to use the word with a T, but all these guys,
THUGS or TOUTS, whichever one.
Who monitors these guys that go around?
So now,
where does the revenue go to?
So that's now a case, as the was talking about with the NYSC story, implementation, right? So you can make all the executive orders or make all the announcements you want at the top of the tree, but how does it get down to the leaves and branches and the roots? So we continue.
Thisday newspaper has this next story. Senate addresses Buhari's concerns, passes PIG bill. Deveo, please take us through this story, especially answering these questions, what the bills are meant for and how they plan to implement them.
Well, this is part of the duties of our National Assembly to pass some of these bills, and most times we the citizens are not aware of what's going on, but we need to, because this is where good governance is implemented. Now, unfortunately, the story was about the PIG bill being among the many, and the story is very weak on it, although I want to speak more about it. But some of the highlights of some of the bills that were passed, there are about 17 in number, 7 of which came from the House of Rep. Well, the major one that was highlighted here was the FCT Directorate Road Traffic Administration Service Bill, which seeks to introduce the park and pay system in Abuja. Now, I think this actually should have been done in Lagos likewise, because the park and pay system basically is where especially for capital cities, where the metropolis has huge traffic control concerns. The city or the state is able to legislate you pay for where you park in some certain zones, like it's done outside the country. For some certain minutes, you've seen signboards that you can only park here.
We see a lot of those spots in Marina.
Yeah,
Marina.
I like to call them PLEs, parking lot entrepreneurs. Those guys that show up.
That's a fancy way of putting it.
Those guys that show up and say, "Oh, guy, you want to park here?" We do it now. We do it in Lagos.
We do it indirectly.
Yes,
we do it indirectly, but
it's not at the official level.
This is at the official level, legislated. The revenue goes to the states, and at least there's a fixed tariff. You know how much, because if I remember before, we used to pay like 100 naira.
Right.
Then they got greedy at some point and started charging 200. 500, etc. and co. And then you actually have officials, state government officials, in whichever, or if the state government is going to put it in the hand of the local government. But the main story here, or the second one, was also the bill that's also going to establish the City University of Technology, Yaba. That's the conversion of Yaba Tech to the university status, plus some other schools that were mentioned here. But the main one, the Equalization Fund, which was at variance with what the president wanted, the Senate has acceded to it, which is why it's being passed. But let's not just allow this story to pass. The PIGB is one of the core infrastructure bills to shift our nation because we depend on oil. Now, what was the issue? Inside the downstream sector, we know that the price is fixed for both PMS, that's fuel, and then DPK, that's kerosene. Now, AGO has been deregulated
That's
long
diesel.
ago. Yes, diesel. So what we have been clamoring for, and that's the investors, that we cannot invest if the price is fixed because of the capital intensity that's required. So hopefully there will be another story that will break this down into pieces so that we can understand the full ramifications of the PIGB.
Thank you, Deveo. Emeka from Injibo says, again, guys, is the Joint Tax Board recognized in law? My simple answer is no. And so government and acclaimed tax consultants would continue to run amok in the land.
All right, we're moving quickly to the next story from the Vanguard newspaper, and this should interest you, Reuters. The federal government, through the National Library Commission, has concluded plans to take the campaigns for mass literacy and revival of reading culture to multi-packs, hospitals, and schools across the country.
Yes, indeed. Okay. They want to promote reading culture. They say that it's become moribund. We don't read enough in Nigeria. We know what's our literacy rate? 60%, 70%. It's pretty high. And
illiteracy.
Did I? Yeah, excuse me.
No,
Illiteracy.
like
Excuse
literacy.
me. Right. So why they are taking this to the motor parks? I mean, we've got to address issues in schools and children.
Public schools,
right? How many kids are out of school in Nigeria? 8 million, I think, or 9 million total. That's the population of some African countries. So, the motor parks, from what I've observed, those guys are pretty busy trying to fill up their buses so they can go where they're going. I'm not really sure how you plan to implement this. And then do people? I mean, maybe our listeners can send a message. People still read physical books. These things are done on tablets now.
Most of these motor parks, you find hawkers actually hawking
the books. Yeah, but I don't know what is that going to do for a motor park operator who wants to just collect money to take you from A to B. I don't know why they're focusing here.
It'll be interesting to see the structure that they plan to use to implement this reading culture campaign.
Well, look, if I want to get cynical about this, there's money behind these things. Operations, they have to disburse projects. Yeah, I don't know. So you could go there, but because really, honestly, if we're being very straightforward with ourselves, what is honestly the point of trying to get motor park operators to read more? What is that supposed to do?
I think you've raised an interesting point. One would wonder why we're not concentrating on refurbishing our libraries, making sure that we digitalize.
It's part of the plan.
Library. And public schools, really.
Look, again, the theme of today's show is costs for the railway, costs for NYSC, costs for taxes on telecom. Where is the cost of upgrading? How many libraries are in? Have you been to a public library here in Lagos or anywhere else recently? The cost is enormous to upgrade is you go from manual to digital. Yeah, so that's a whole other project on itself. You have to partner with the private sector if you want to get this on ground. But again, I struggle to see what motor park operators are going to benefit from reading more.
Anyway, very quickly, my brother learned how to make smoothies. I think he's reacting to the Empire.
Okay.
He learned how to make smoothies, cocktails, grilling through that scheme. He has a job, but makes good money from it as a side job. If it needs to be upgraded, so be it, but do not scrap it.
All right.
Talking about keeping costs down, this should be good. The federal government is planning to reduce Unity Schools charges, and they're setting up a secondary education commission. This is from the Thisday newspaper. Professor Anthony Anwuka, who's the Minister of State for Education, made that disclosure in Abuja at a news conference.
You want to take that, or are you shaking your head?
I have always actually been against the federal government's presence within federal government schools, simply because we have to accept that good education, qualitative education requires funding these days. Now, however, the Unity schools have been captured under the federal government education commission, which is supposed to cover not just Unity schools, but secondary schools across board. Now, this is actually required because you need a particular body to oversee and look at this, because before now, the Ministry of Education had not done a pretty good job about that. Now, one of the first changes that they brought about, one was the reduction of charges. Now, I don't understand. Is this charge the same thing as school fees? but they're saying from 83,000 to 49,000. Now, that should sound as a good thing, but we'll come back to that. 2, they've also pegged a PTA levy at 5,000 across board, thereby abolishing the arbitrary charges of 75,000, which nearly inhibited access to unity colleges. Then finally, he mentioned that Anuka mentioned that unity schools will remain in Nigeria as long as the Buhari administration is in power. Oops, that is a political statement. That is not what should be coming out of the mouth of someone who handles education for us. Because remember, education should have nothing to do with politics. Children are meant to be taught and groomed within an agnostic political atmosphere so that they can actually get a balance of what is going on. Now, 2, government is a continuum. The idea behind unity schools was to create an equal opportunity for Nigerian citizens across Nigeria to be able to receive same education so that they could give this back to their own people as well as other Nigerians. Now, he also mentioned that the federal government has embarked on the rehabilitation of schools. They've spent about 7 billion in security infrastructure in the last 4 years, given the backdrop of the kidnapping and that had taken place in many of the schools. Now, you see, at the end of the day, even though they're claiming that there's the construction of classroom blocks, hostels, laboratories, and others, I would like to ask where. Listeners, if you have seen a change in your federal government schools, those of you who are there, please call in, send a message, let us know.
And real quick, just please, for anyone, let me know if this makes sense to you. You've increased spending to upgrade schools. You're giving us the billions you spent, and now you're reducing the charges that those schools are supposed to be collecting back to recoup the investment you've put into the schools.
How is that possible?
How does that even make sense? Like how? How?
Make the school
No. The truth is, it's another subsidy. However, how many subsidies can we afford as a federal government?
Reacting to Emeka's allusion that the Joint Tax Board was unlawful, Prince sent in a message here. It says, Joint Tax Board was established by Section 86(1) of the Personal Income Tax Cap P8 LFN 2004. Thank you very much, Prince. And then Danny here says, quickly said, NYSC should be scrapped. The objective is national integration. Let's replace it on the graduate exchange program. If you are in SW University, you should spend 1 semester in 2001 in a university in the north and do 1 semester in 300 level rather. It's a 200 and 300 level in another region in the country. The program should include community projects, entrepreneurship. Once you graduate, you start your business or get a job.
I'm with him. Deveo, I'm sorry, I'm with him.
All right,
I'm with that message.
Really wrap this really fast. From the Guardian newspaper, the vice president is cautioning governors.
Yes,
and
of course.
all those occupying leadership positions in the country to refrain from public utterances that could stir up crisis in politics.
Let me just quickly take this with one line. There's already a law against hate speech, okay?
Yes.
However, the federal government has refused to, how do they call it, wielding the big stick?
Implementation.
Yes, because the last time some certain bodies looked at Nigerians, pointed their fingers and said, we're the ones that said it, get out. Nothing happened to them.
Nothing happened.
All right, we're done.
Something
will happen. The fact that it's a Feel Good Friday, we thank you, gentlemen.
Are you a member of a certain church? Something is about to happen.
Really though?
Deveo Okorie, thank you.
Yo, I love my people.
And thank you, Rotis.
Thank you.
It's been fun.
I mean, it's Friday now.
Yes, it is.
Coming up next, we talk sports inside of the locker room. This is Smooth 98.1.